Good morning. Today we're doing the hand sewing project. So you need your muslin, your shears, your see-through ruler, some pins, some marking devices, and eventually we'll need closures, and I'll tell you about those later. First we're going to cut out our piece of fabric. It wants to be 12 inches by 18 inches. So the 18-inch side wants to go on the cross, the wide width way, and the 12-inch wants to go along the selvage. So we're going to measure. I'm going to use my marker so you can see what I'm doing. You're going to use a pencil. So I'm measuring down 12. And I'm going to measure across 18. There. All right. Now we're going to cut this out. Okay. All right. Now that you have your piece cut, we're going to learn a whole new sewing technique. I'm going to meet you at the serger. So, this is the serger. It works just like a regular sewing machine, except that it has, instead of one needle, it has 4. So that's why we have 4 threads. What it does is it overlocks the edges of the cut end of the fabric so that they don't fray. So the trick is you're going to run the edge of the fabric right along the edge of the machine here, and whatever bits are hanging over, this knife blade is going to cut off. So we're going to start by raising the foot and putting our fabric right up in front of the 2 needles here. This is the knife blade. It's going to chop off anything that hangs over the edge. So if you steer your fabric like this, it's going to cut a big line down your fabric, so don't do that. Here we go. When you're done, you're going to run it all the way past the needles, leaving a long chain of thread as a tail, and you're going to cut it off here at the end of the fabric. If you cut it off here at the end of the thread, the whole thing will come unthreaded and you will be sad. Now notice this is what got trimmed off. Just a little tiny bit. That's all we want. No more. Alright, we're going to do the other side. So both sides will be serged. Watch me do it again. Lift our presser foot up. Lower it down. The fabric is just in front of the needles. We're going to sew all the way down. And cut your thread here. And that's it. Serging is very easy, especially on a straight run like that. Curves are a little more complicated. Alright, we're going to meet you back over at the cutting table and we're going to do some hand sewing. Okay, when I said meet you back at the cutting table, I lied because I forgot that the very first thing we're going to do on our hand sewing project is actually going to be done by machine. So we're learning hems today, hems and closures, but the first kind of hem that I want you to learn is a shirt tail hem or a rolled hem, and we do that on the machine. And you don't need any prep for it. All you have to do is do the technique. So I'm going to show you the technique. It's not hard, it just takes some practice. So the edges of our fabric have been serged. We're going to roll that over once, and then we're going to roll it over again. And just like that flat fill seam that we did the other day, we're going to sew right on the edge. Now notice I'm not measuring anything, I'm not pinning anything. All I've done is roll it over the width of the serging and then do it one more time. So here we go. I'm going to put this under. I'm going to put the presser foot down first to hold it for me, and then I'm going to put the needle in. Now my hands are free, the foot is holding the fabric, and I'm going to roll some more of this down like this, and I'm going to sew right on the edge. and I'm going to remember to backstitch. There. Now all you have to do is go slow and keep rolling. And stop and roll some more. And stop and roll some more. See, this isn't hard. It's very fast. Now I'm going to backstitch. See how quick and easy that was? It just takes a little practice. Cut my threads, and that is a shirt tail hem or a rolled hem. Now the next thing we would do to finish this is go to the iron and press it flat. So I'll meet you over there. Alright, so we're at the iron. We're going to trim our threads, and then we're going to press this hem nice and flat. That is what makes it look really good on stage, is when their hems are pressed flat. Okay, so that's the first hem. Now I'm going to meet you back over at the cutting table and we're going to learn everything else. Hi, we're back. So what I didn't tell you to do before we started this whole thing, and I should have, is flip your fabric to the front. Remember the front? What we didn't do was we didn't give ourselves a front. So even though I've already done my hem, which is on the inside of the fabric, I'm now going to show you that this is the outside of the fabric. So you'll see the difference. Okay, this is our outside. We should have done that first. Outside, inside. Okay, now we're going to learn the second hem. The second hem is called a cross stitch or a catch stitch. So we're going to flip our piece over and do the other side. So for a cross stitch or a catch stitch, you're going to need your hand sewing needle and some thread. You're going to need your pins, and you're going to need a see-through ruler so you can measure. So for this hem, I'm going to have you do a 2-inch hem, which happens to be the same width as your see-through ruler. So you're just going to measure, fold the other end of your project up 2 inches, just like that. And you're going to pin it down. Just like this. Remember, pins have to go in perpendicular to the line that you're sewing, even when you're sewing by hand. Okay, and now we're ready to do some hand sewing, and I realize I have not brought over here any needles or thread, so pause just a second, I'll be back. Okay, so now I have my thread, and now I have a hand sewing needle. Remember, the difference between a hand sewing needle and a sewing needle, or machine sewing needle, is that the hole in the hand sewing needle is at the opposite end from the pointy end. In a machine, the hole is in the same end as the pointy end, so you need to go get a hand sewing needle. Alright, preferably one that has a fairly large eye that you can see to thread. I have to wear my glasses to see to thread it. So, you're going to take some thread, and you're going to thread the needle, just like that. Now, this is called double threading because we want 2 links of thread coming down our needle. Now, your thread on the needle should not be any longer than the length from your hand to your nose. No longer. If it's longer than that, it'll get tangled. So cut it off there. There we go. Now, you're going to have to tie a knot at the end. We're going to tie both ends together. Oops. And here's the way I do it. Go around, grab it, hold the knot, and then pull it to the end. And then you have to do that one more time. Okay, now I'm holding the knot on top of the other knot, and I'm pulling it to the end. Do you see how I did that? I'll do it one more time. Okay, make a knot. Get the knot on top of the other knot, pinch it, and then pull your thread. See, and I made a third knot on top of the second one and the first one. Hold it down here.
Yeah.
Okay, see how I did that? All right, now that we have a knot, I'm going to take the needle end, and if you're right-handed, you're going to have your needle in your right hand, and you're going to start on the left side of the fabric. So what we're going to do is we're going to make little X's all the way down the fabric. That's called the cross stitch or the catch stitch. So you're going to start with the hem end. Notice how I have my fingers behind the hem. And you're going to make one stitch. Notice the stitch is perfectly horizontal. Then we're going to come across up at a diagonal through the outside of the garment. See how the needle's going through the outside of the garment? And we're going to make another horizontal stitch. But when I pull this tight, you can see that it's at an angle. The stitch is at an angle. Do you see that? So that's the first part of our X. Then we're going to come back down. I'm going to take that pin out. We're going to come back down and just through the hem, make another horizontal stitch out of just the hem. So there's the X. Now, it's a really flattened out X, like it got smushed on the head with a hammer, right? But it's an X. The only part of this stitch that shows on the outside is the top part. See? Because we didn't go through to the other piece of fabric on the bottom two stitches. See how that works? So you're going to keep repeating that all the way down. So when you come across to the top, that goes through the outside. And when you come across to the bottom, that only comes out of the hem. Okay, keep your stitches fairly close together and keep them pulled fairly tautly. Notice how when the thread wants to get caught on my pins, I just take them out. So it looks like this. This is how we hem men's pants. This is how we hem very large period skirts. This is how we hem cuffs on jackets. Oh, got caught. Just go slow and be careful. The stitches don't want to get too far apart because you don't want to get like a lady's heel stuck in here and have her rip the whole thing out, and then you have to do all 5 yards of that skirt again. Now, if you run out of thread, and you will if you're doing a 5-yard hem on a period skirt, you're just going to tie it off at the bottom and then re-thread your needle. Don't wait until it's too late to re-thread. So now you're asking, well, when is it too late? When I run out of thread? Yeah, that's way too late. You want to stop before the thread left is shorter than your needle. Once the thread is shorter than your needle, it's too late. See? My thread is still longer than my needle, so I can still get a few more stitches in. I may make it to the end, I don't know. See, my thread is still longer, I can get one more stitch in. Now, it's getting time to tie off. Alright, so here's how we tie off. we sew another stitch through that same place that we just sewed, and then we put the needle through the loop before we pull it shut. Alright. There. Alright. So we're going to have to cut that off. And I know we only have a little bit left to go, but we got to start over. Alright, so one more time. Thread the needle. Okay. I'm going to tie our knot again. Okay, and then we're going to start back here where we left off, out of just the hem. We're going to make that last stitch. And again, you never want to end on the outside of the garment. You want to come back and end out of the hem. Alright, now, here's how you tie off. You're going to sew right back through the stitch you just sewed and put the needle through the loop before you pull it shut. And then do the same thing again. And then do the same thing again. Now, that's not going to come out. Then you can cut this off and you're done with your cross stitch or your catch stitch. That's been hemmed. Now this is how it looks from the front. Just like that. Now obviously you would use the same color thread as your garment. I used red so that it would show up. These are the only stitches that are going to show on the outside. And if you've got black pants and black thread, nobody's even going to see that. And this is how it looks from the inside. Stitches are small and neat and close together. Okay? You could maybe get a 1950s stiletto heel through there, but you're not going to get a big period shoe heel through there. Okay? Now to finish this off, we have to go to the iron and iron it, so I'll meet you over there. Okay, time to iron. Press it flat. Use the steam button. There you go. Perfect. Alright, back for more hand sewing. What we're going to do now are closures. So we have 3 different kinds of closures. And I will show them to you. We have buttons, we have snaps, and we have hooks and eyes. We're going to do buttons first. So here's our buttons. We have 3 different kinds. We have a 1-hole button or a shank button. This is the shank. See that? Shank. We have a 2-hole button, and we have a 4-hole button. Alright? So we're going to do our buttons first. Now, buttons go on the outside of the garment, so we're going to flip our project over to the outside. Alright, buttons typically close like a shirt down the center front. We're not going to do buttonholes right now, but I'm going to show you how to sew the buttons on. So we're going to need to line up where our buttons are going to go. You're going to use a pencil, but I'm going to use a marker. And the buttons want to be evenly spaced, and they want to start in the middle. So our project is now about 8 3/4 of an inch. So our middle is going to be about here. And I'm going to put a little dot for the middle. So that's going to be the middle of our pretend shirt. Now, I've tried to pick buttons that were about the same size. Of course, when you do this, your buttons will all be the same button, so they will all be the same size. We're going to take a measurement off our largest button, which is about 1 inch, right? So we're going to make our next dots 1.5 inches away from each other, because if this is where the first button is, we don't want our second button here, right? we'd want our second button higher up. So we're going to measure over 1.5 inches and then down 1.5 inches, and that's where our buttons are going to go. See, they're all lined up nicely. All right. So we're going to sew our shank button on first, and then our 2-hole button, and then our 4-hole button, like this. So you have to get your hand sewing needle and some thread. So if you need more thread, put more thread on it and tie your knot again. Remember, you need 2 knots, one on top of each other. There we go. Now, I'll move these out of the way. So for any button, the first thing you want to do is anchor your stitch to the fabric. So I've sewn my first stitch into the fabric. Then I'm going to thread the shank button on my needle, and whee, this is the fun part. And then I'm going to sew another stitch like this. Okay, now our button is attached. Now we just got to do this like another, 17 million times, depending on what actor or actress is wearing this and how mean they are to their costumes when they change. So we've sewed through the fabric. Now we're sewing through the shank, and then again through the fabric, and then again through the shank. And it's the same over and over and over. Through the fabric, through the shank. If the buttons are like on a cuff and they're just decorative, then you don't have to do this that many times. But if the actress actually has to unbutton a blouse or whatever, and she's doing a quick change in the dark, then you probably want to do it, not 50 times, but maybe 20 times. It depends how rough they are in their costumes, but a lot. You don't want her to rip the button off in her haste to get changed. Okay, so when you have decided that is enough sewing, right, we're going to sew through to the back, to the inside of the project. And then you're going to close off just like we did before, where you're going to sew through all those stitches you just sewed, and then through the loop before you pull it shut. And then again. Why am I doing this without my glasses? There we go. And then one more time, just to be very sure. Okay, so now our shank button is sewn on and we can cut our threads. Alrighty. Now we're gonna do another knot and another button. Okay. 2-hole button. Now, through 2-hole button, you can have your holes oriented horizontally or vertically. It doesn't matter. The only thing is, if you're doing a whole row of buttons, they all have to be sewn on the same way. You can't have one vertical and one horizontal, or a mixed match of different ways. They'll have to go on the same way. So, anchor your stitch into your fabric first, and then slide your button on. I'm going for horizontal here. So, through the button, and at the same time through the fabric. See how I've done that? Through the button and through the fabric. And then back up through the other side of the button. Like that. And then back down through the button and through the fabric at the same time. And then up through the other side, other hole. And then down through the button, through the fabric. Sometimes your thread gets tangled. You just have to be patient and pull it through. Don't let it get all snarled. And then if it does, don't let that upset you. Just gently work it back out and then up through the other side. So again, you can do this, 20 times, but you got to make sure that the button's not going to pop off in the middle of the show. And then when you're done, go back through to the inside of the fabric, like we did before. And finish it off the same way. So through the stitches, through the loop, through the stitches, through the loop, one more time. Done. Okay. Then, one last button. I may not have enough thread, but we'll see. Okay. Anchor into the fabric first. Put the button on. Whee! Now, again, you can have your stitches go horizontally or vertically or in an X. It doesn't matter, I don't care, but they all need to be the same. So, I'm going to go for horizontally. So, down through the other hole. There. Okay, see? And then I'm going to come up through the bottom row and then down through the second hole on the bottom. See, and now I've got 2 horizontal stitches. So now I'm going to come up through the top right again. And then down through the top left. And you're just going to keep repeating this pattern until it's been sewn on enough and you think it's going to stay. And you're going to finish it off the same way. Now, I'm running out of thread, so I'm not going to do as many stitches as I should. But this isn't a real garment and nobody's really going to wear it, so. And one more. We'll do one more. Now, I'm going to finish, so I'm going to go down through to the inside again, flip it over, and tie off. Okay. And one more time. Now we're done with buttons. Now, you're definitely going to need to rethread. I'm going to flip this back over. That's what our buttons look like. Let's get more thread. Next, we're going to do snaps. Snaps and hooks and eyes are also closures. They keep your garment on you. I'm going to tie my knot. Okay. Now we're ready for our snaps. These are snaps. Let's take a close-up look at our snaps. Okay, this one is the male snap. You can probably figure out why. See the little protrusion that snaps out? That's the male. This is the female. The female has a little well. They go together. Okay, it's very important not to confuse the two of them, because if you flip the female over, she seems to have a little protrusion too. But snaps can't snap like that. That doesn't work. They only go together one way. So you have to make sure that your male is sticking up and that your female is also sticking up the right way. The way you tell the difference is that the male is thinner and flat. It's flat on the bottom. Can you see that? How flat that is? How thin and flat? The male sits flatly on the bottom with its little protrusion sticking up. The female is curved. Can you see how curved that is? So the female is like a little sombrero. It's like a little sombrero, and it's thicker. So that's how you know the difference. Okay, so how we're going to put these on is we're going to flip our fabric to the inside, and we're going to pretend that it's closing up the back. Okay, as if this were some sort of, you know, bodice, skirt, something. Okay, so when things close up the back, the female snap goes on the bottom and the male snap goes on the top, and that's how they snap together, like this. And then you can hear that sound, snap. That's how you know that you've got them on right. So the way you can line them up that works really well is you get yourself a pin. See, there's a hole in the middle of the female snap, and it will hold your snap right there for you as you sew it on. So we're going to sew her on first. Now you'll notice that there's 4 holes in the sides. That's how we're going to sew it on. We're not going to sew from this hole to that hole like we did with buttons. We're going to sew around the edge of each hole like petals on a flower. Like this. So we're going to do 4, 5, or 6 stitches around each hole. And this will hold your snaps on much better than if you sew them from one hole to the next hole like a button. This is much stronger. Okay, so once you have enough stitches on the one side, then you can skip to the next side. And we're going to skip by skipping underneath. We're sewing a stitch to the next side. And we're coming up underneath. And now we're going to sew around that edge. And now that I have it sewn on halfway, I don't need this pin anymore. Okay, so let's flip it around. Let's sew over to the next hole. And sew that hole down. Last hole. I'm going to sew down to it. Just a few more stitches and we're done. Now, when you're done, we're going to sew, instead of sewing back to the inside, you're just going to sew through these stitches right here and through the loop before you pull it shut, just like we did before. Just like that. One more time. There, done. Cut that off. Oops. Okay. Now we have to sew her friend on. Let's line it back up. Alright. Now, to figure out where the boy needs to go, you line them up, and then guess what? You can just put your pin through, and there's another hole in the boy. See? So that's how I did that. You want to see how I did that again? Here, let me show you one more time. You put the boy on top of the girl, lay your fabric over where it needs to close, and put the pin through, just like that. See, now that's where the boy needs to go. That's how we do that. So you're going to get your thread and you're going to sew the boy on the same way you did the girl. I need a knot first. Okay. Alright. Now remember, you're sewing the boy to the inside of the garment. So the stitches are going to show on the outside. Well, I mean, obviously, the girl snap shows on the outside, but it's being covered up by the boy. So just make sure to do a neat job. Okay, and skip around to the next one. And again, if you're using the same color thread as your garment, we're not going to really see your stitches. Oops, sorry. Okay, and now I can take that pin out. And skip around to the next side. And skip around to the last side. Okay, and to close again, we're going to tie it off by sewing through the stitches we just sewed and putting our needle through the loop before we pulled it shut. And again, and again. There we go. Cut that off. Now, if you've done it right, this should line up and snap. Yay! Our little garment is closed. Okay. But now we need a hook and eye too. So we're going to flip it over and do this one on the other end. Alright, so here's our hook and eye. It also has two pieces. So we like to think of this as a hook and eye, but really the real name is a hook and bar. These are used mostly for skirts and pants at the waist. So notice it also has a bunch of little tiny holes here, and we're going to sew it on the same way that we did the snap, where instead of going from this hole to that hole like a button, we're not going to do that. We're going to sew around the edge of each hole. So the male hook has 5 holes, okay? You can't forget about the center one, that's the most important one. Then the female bar has 4 holes, okay? Now, just like with the snap, one of these goes on the bottom. So if you're a hook, you're going to go on top. So you're going to go here on the inside of the garment. And then the bar is going to go over here to the corresponding place wherever that needs to close. And in theater, our skirts all have one hook on them, but they probably have 5 or 6 different bars, depending on the waist size of the girl who wore it last. We just leave the one hook on and keep adding bars to make it bigger or smaller. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew my hook on first. I have to unsnap my snap to do this. Okay. So, bar's going to go up here on the edge. Let's sew that on first. And I'm going to need more thread to do this. You're probably going to need more thread too. So, you rethread, I'll rethread. Ready. Now, here we go. Start through the fabric first, come up through the hole. See how I'm doing this? Go in the fabric, come up through the hole of the hook. Just like this. Now, you just skip to the next one. Alright, now we're going to sew through the fabric and skip and come up in the middle hole. Okay, I'm going to flip this around. Oops, sorry. If the camera work seems like Blair Witch, that was my fault. I bumped it. So now we're going to sew that middle one. Four or 5 stitches there. And then we're going to skip to the next hole. I'm going to turn this around again. I'm going to go through that one. In through the fabric, up through the hole. Okay. And then skip to the last hole. One more time. Okay. Now, to finish, exactly the same, you're going to sew through those last stitches that you just did. Okay. And then put your needle through your loop before you pull it shut. And then one more time. If your thread all gets in a snarl, don't panic. Straighten it out. There. Now pull it shut. And then, was that 2? Anyway, here's 3. You really can't ever sew closures on enough. Somebody will they'll always fall off, eventually. So if you forget where you are, just sew it one more time. Alright, and there's your hook. The hook is all sewn on. Now, remember we have to place where the bar is going to go. Let's line this back up. Now, so the way you're going to do this is you're going to roll the fabric back until you can see the bar. See the bar there?
Hang on.
Okay. Roll the fabric back until you can see the bar, and that's where they need to go, right? So you're going to take your pin. Oh, I got the pen. Thank you, cameraman. And you can put a little pin in there. That's where that needs to go. And then move that out of the way. Now, oh, and I still need to tie a knot. I bet hand sewing today makes you glad that we have sewing machines and you don't have to sew everything by hand. Okay, here we go. Now, I'm going to start over here where I don't have a pin through the fabric. Go down through the fabric, up through the hole. We get this one on. Okay, now I'm going to take this pin out so I can get the rest of my stitches in there. And I'm skipping to the other side to do some more stitches. Alright, now we got to skip to the other end of the bar. I'm going to take this out. So, come out right next to it, and then go underneath, and then keep going. Alright, let's flip over so I can do that last hole. My bar is kind of wonky. That's okay. It's gnarly. Okay. Just a few more stitches. Alright, now, to tie off, we're going to sew back through these stitches just like we did. And one more time. Okay, there we go. Cut that off. You are all done with your hand sewing project. And what I need you to do is flip it back to the inside. We're going to label it with cross stitch or catch stitch, whichever term you want to use. And shirt tail hem or rolled hem on this one, whichever term you want to use. And then shank button, 2-hole button, 4-hole button. And then flip. Female snap, male snap, hook, and bar. And then write your name on it and turn it in, and you'll be done. All right, good job.